I'm Mary Greendale, and welcome to another edition of Just Thinking. We've been talking a lot about local government this last few weeks, and today we're going for a broader participation, a broader view of Holliston, and we're going to actually look at Metrowest. I have with me today the executive director of the not the Metrowest Foundation. I really was unhappy when we created that the foundation with using that name. But anyway, so we have the Foundation for Metrowest, which is located in South Natick. You're still located there?
Yes.
Okay. And I have Jay Kim, who's the executive director. And this foundation is actually kind of special to Holliston because one of your founders was a very prominent person in our community. That would be Patricia Poitras. They live in Boston now, but yeah, so we have a real connection right from the very beginning.
Absolutely.
Very, very beginning. You're a lot bigger, not necessarily geographically, but in terms of what you're doing. You've
Yes.
reached out a lot. One of my favorite programs was always the program with the youth philanthropy.
Yes.
And we'll get to that in a minute. But first, I'd like you to tell me a little bit about yourself, how you ended up at the foundation, and what's the foundation doing these days?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Mary, for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here. I've been with the foundation for about 5 years now, and I took over as executive director about 2 years ago. And I live in Sherburne, so neighboring town.
Yeah.
And I've been in the Boston area for about 10 years. And previous to this job, I was working for a nonprofit organization called Crossroads for Kids. And then at one point, I was also working at the Boston Foundation, another community foundation here in the region, in the area. But yeah, and the Foundation for Metrowest, we, as your local community foundation, serving about 30 plus communities in this sort of Metro West region of Greater Boston. We are one of 17 community foundations across the state, actually.
That's
and so, yeah, we all have sort of our piece of the pie. Mm-hmm. And so our catchment area, as I mentioned, is the 30 plus cities and towns here. And, we've been actually very busy lately doing a lot of work around pandemic emergency relief efforts. Oh. And I'd say the last 2.5 years, of course, with COVID, has really been challenging, right, for our most vulnerable residents in our entire region. And so, I think we've been able to really play a role that we're really proud of in terms of being that conduit for a lot of sort of contributions, gifts, to come through the foundation, and then for us to get those dollars to the nonprofit organizations that are on the ground serving, folks with the greatest need in the area. And so, contributions came from all over the place, right? It came from individuals, families, from foundations, from corporate entities. In fact, I'll tell a story. There were 2 middle school students from Holliston, 2 young girls at the beginning of the pandemic. They had heard that there are people in their communities that are struggling, and so they made masks, and they sold masks, and the proceeds of those sales came to the foundation, and then we contributed that to organizations in the region. And so that's the role we got to play, during the pandemic. And so even state funding came through us to our most vulnerable. And so over the last 2.5 years, we've actually contributed over $6 million specifically for pandemic emergency relief efforts to help people, eat every day, make sure they have a roof over their heads, even things like supporting, children's mental health challenges and things of that nature. So obviously the pandemic has been very, very challenging for folks, our most vulnerable residents here.
When you say you work with other nonprofits, does that include things like the Red Cross and those folks, or are we talking the smaller nonprofits like Project Just Because and those kind of things?
Smaller nonprofits, Project Just Because, A Place to Turn, organizations that are local, that are really working to support folks in our communities. And so, a myriad of organizations that we supported, again, through different grants and efforts. Yeah,
$6 million is a lot in that network.
Yes,
$6 million to the American Red Cross is not, but for those small foundation and nonprofit organizations, that is a lot of money.
Yes.
And it's handed have been very challenging to set up your organization to distribute quickly and in such a
Yeah.
wide way.
Well, I think it actually wasn't that difficult because that's what we do, And I
Right.
think that as this community's community foundation, we have the relationships with all of those nonprofit partners. We know what they're doing. We have our finger on the pulse. So when the pandemic hit again, immediately we were reaching out and having conversations and saying, what's going on? What are you seeing? And then you were hearing about an influx of people coming in because they weren't able to work, many people, and they needed, how are they going to put food on the table, right?
Yeah.
And so with that, those relationships that we have with those nonprofit partners, we were able to sort of understand, okay, where should we direct those dollars? Where should we make sure that we can have the greatest impact? With every contribution that comes in, so we can make sure we're helping folks, again, get the food they need, make sure they're staying in their homes, et cetera. Yeah.
Very good. So your organization undertook a study
Yes.
to look at your 30, whatever, plus or minus
Yes.
communities.
Yes.
And evaluate what? You were taking the temperature on who we are, what we are doing, where we are going, what we need, what we want.
Absolutely. As a community foundation as well, we believe one of our roles is to educate, our broader community about what is going on. What are the needs? What are the challenges? What are the strengths of our community? And so we learned about this, data indicator site actually from another community foundation in the state. And they had this incredible site that had all these data points, right? Anything from, median income levels to poverty rates to third grade reading test scores. And we thought, wow, this is really interesting to see all the data in one place. But what's really, I think, really amazing about this site is that it doesn't have just numbers and data, it has an analysis. It explains, what does this data mean? How is our region doing? It has charts, it has graphs, so you can really see how are we doing relative to other communities, how are we doing relative to other counties, or in terms of the state. And it just really, it's very illuminating, and I think we thought, okay, not only can it help educate just the general public about what's going on, our nonprofit partners can use this data to help tell their stories about what they're doing and who they're serving. We thought, municipalities could potentially use this data to help, with whatever decisions or things that they're doing. And so really, we thought of it as a resource, as a gift that we could give to our community to have this data and to have the analysis built in. But of course, for us, it also was a way to help focus our work so that we could look at the data and say, all right, what are the needs? What are the challenges that we should be focusing on, that we should be paying more attention to? And so we actually launched this site in January of 2020.
I knew you were going to say 2020. It's like, of course you did.
So it was a wonderful event. We had the lieutenant governor. There's a nice article in the Boston Globe, and it was, here we are. We're providing this resource to our community, and then of course, 2 months later, we have the pandemic, and then all of our efforts sort of went to the emergency relief efforts that I talked about. So we really didn't get to talk about Impact Metrowest as much as we would have liked. And so, of course, with the census just happening and having new data, we actually had a chance to refresh it, and that's what we just did, and kind of relaunched, I guess, the site. And so it has new data with the new census information, and new analysis built in and things of that nature. And so now we thought, okay, let's take two, let's go back out and talk about the data, and then use the data for us, again, to help focus our work and, again, where we should dedicate more time.
Has anything changed in that time?
Things have changed. I think, it's a unique time frame. I think the next time we refresh the data, we might see some greater sort of changes. But if you look at some of the data in terms of actually like population or demographics diversity, if you look at it in terms of from 2000 to 2020, you do see things like change in population in terms of diversity, as I mentioned. But as an example, back in 2020, for this entire region, it was about almost 90% white. Now it's more like 75%. And so you're seeing more ethnic diversity. The Asian population has grown. The Latinx community has grown here in the region. So there are definitely some changing there, and that's across the country.
Sure.
You know, that's not
Sure.
just unique to our region, but that is there. I'd say one thing you're seeing as it relates to the impact of the pandemic, but also in terms of some of the changing demographics, you're seeing some data around poverty rates increasing in certain communities. You're seeing data around third grade reading proficiency test scores. And actually, this isn't in the site right now, but the latest MCAS test scores, have come out in terms
Yes.
of the results, and that was actually, I think, announced yesterday. And actually, we saw some data points that were quite alarming that came out of that data. So, in 2021, if you look at third grade reading proficiency test scores for MCAS, right? In third grade reading, that's a really important milestone. So the studies have shown if you're not able to read by third grade, your hope for success in the future is quite diminished. There are a lot of challenges, right? You learn to read and then you read to learn, right? And so if you're not able to read to learn by third grade, it really puts you behind the 8 ball in terms of trying to have a successful life, career, et cetera. Important milestone. So if you look at third grade reading in some of our communities here in the region, 2021 in Framingham, one of our neighboring communities, 35% of third graders in Framingham are proficient in reading. 35%. And then that was in 2021. The latest test scores that just came out, it actually went down to 26. So you went from 1 out of 3 not being proficient to now 1 out of 4.
Wow.
Or being proficient, I should say.
Wow.
And so that is definitely an impact of the
Related,
pandemic.
sure.
But just to be honest, 35% is not great.
It wasn't great to begin with. Right, right.
And then a community like Milford, another neighboring community, their test scores came in at 28% of their third graders were proficient. And just as a comparison point, Boston Public Schools, 29. So we now have 2 communities in the Metrowest region that are below Boston. Nothing to be proud of by any means.
No, it just indicates that they are struggling in the same way that Boston is. And
absolutely.
so when you take the demographic information and you line it up, I'm assuming that you're seeing that the bulk of it is in the students who are in the poverty levels or are different, and perhaps the ethnicities or the race differences.
Absolutely.
Is the case.
That is correct. So children living in poverty
Yeah.
is a data point we have. And for the region, for white and Asian communities, children living in poverty, somewhere around 7%. But for Latinx communities, 1 out of 4, 25% of children of Latinx background are living in poverty. And poverty is defined in this region as about $24,000 an annual income for a family of 4.
Yeah, and anybody who, you can't find housing for that.
No, no. Cost of living, 85,000-ish
Is it?
is what, I'm not even sure that that's quite accurate in a lot of ways, but think about that, 85 to 24,000.
Sure, big gap.
Big gap.
Big gap.
Big gap.
So how does the foundation then, take this information? What do you do with it in terms of your work?
Yeah.
But also, do you have a role in trying to provide some sort of consistency or coordination or whatever among other partners so that the impact is bigger?
Absolutely. I think the special role that I believe that community foundations play is, and I think, somewhat unique in terms of other philanthropic organizations. So yes, as a foundation, people think, oh, you give money to nonprofits, you give grants, right? And certainly that's, as we talked about, we do that, and very significantly. We give grants to our nonprofit partners. But the other step that we take as a community foundation is that, our goal is to engage more people in philanthropy, meaning we are trying to get more people involved to give back, whether it's an individual, whether it's a family, whether it's a corporation or a business. We are trying to engage those individuals and say, look, this is what's going on in your community. This is what's going on in your backyard. So think about how you can be more philanthropic, and for us that means giving of your time, talent, and treasure how can you get more involved and help your neighbors? And so that's a role we play, and that's why we did Impact Metrowest as an example, right? It's to help educate folks around the needs and challenges. People like data, and I think it's been very helpful. But it's also, we can be that sort of, again, that vehicle for which people can do their philanthropy, have a greater impact. And I think what we're trying to do, especially when we talk about what we're hearing coming out of Impact Metrowest, we've actually decided to kind of hone in on two issues. And we're calling them our action projects. Taking data and doing some, action. And it's really, the two things that we've decided to focus on are this, equity in education, so the third grade reading piece that I just talked about, right? And then the other thing that we're going to focus on is workforce development. Because we're seeing, if you look at, so as an example, some data points, if you want me to talk a little bit about data.
Sure.
If you look at median income levels in our region, so for white and Asian communities, median income levels over 100,000 for the entire region. When you look at Latinx, African American communities, 50-ish, 50,000. Again, huge disparity. Home ownership rates. So for white communities in the region, about 70% own a home. For our Latinx communities, somewhere around 30. And I think we know, right, what's a great way to build wealth, assets? It is home ownership.
It's the only way.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what we thought we would delve into is, how can we help some of our folks living in our communities, lower income, mostly communities of color, how can we get them on career paths, right, where they can build a career, where they can, break the cycle of poverty, right? That's a term we've heard over the years. But that's real. Like, how can we help folks do that? So we've decided to sort of look at partnerships that we can form with nonprofit partners that we know that we're going to, look to collaborate with. Find those job tracks that we really could see some success in getting young people into those tracks, and then help them, evolve in their career, and then again break the cycle of poverty. And then how do we, on the other side, mobilize donors and get more folks to rally around this particular issue to say, look, join us, be a part of this, and we can change people's lives. And already we have initiated a couple partnerships that I think are going to start getting folks on that career path. So I'll talk about some of that. Healthcare jobs are, I think, something that we hear a lot about. You hear about nursing shortages and things of that nature, and that's real.
Radiologists.
Absolutely. But we, actually in conversations that we have with some of our partners, and one in particular, a great institution, Mass Bay Community College. So Mass Bay Community College runs a certified nursing assistant program. And all that is an 8-week program. That's all it is, 8 weeks. And then you take a test and you get a certificate to be a certified nursing assistant. And there are so many employers that need qualified CNAs, right? And it's actually a problem. It's a huge problem.
It is a problem. I was on the board of Mary Ann Morse, the nursing home and the assisted living facilities, and both of them, they struggled, but they struggled less than their for-profit partners, if you will. They were a nonprofit. They are a nonprofit, and so they were able, at the time anyway, to pay a slightly higher, salary and so forth. So they had, a little more loyalty to them and so forth among the workforce. But I'm sure that the pandemic probably undermined absolutely all of that, because just scattered people. I'm sure people either may have left the region, may have had to, go back to wherever they came from in some cases, which, was not their intent.
Absolutely.
But,
Absolutely.
that program also works through Keefe Tech. I know that Keefe Tech has a similar thing where when a student graduates, he or she can graduate with that certificate in hand, so that in fact they're prepared to go into the workforce.
Absolutely. Keefe Tech's doing a great job.
So let me ask you a question about that, because one of my observations over the years is that we sometimes pour money into things from, this level. We just sit here and we just kind of pour it.
Sure.
But really the delivery that matters is the one-on-one with some student, some person, somewhere. Is there a way that or that you can track or whatever that the money, not just in the bottom line, But in terms of the service delivery, how many kids are you actually connecting to, and do they have a real human being that is working with them as a mentor or whatever? Because I think it's sufficient to say that you can look at any study anywhere. Anytime you provide one-on-one mentorship, things do better.
Sure.
You know, so
Sure.
are you able to do that? Are you able to track that? And what are you doing?
Well, absolutely. So the partnerships that we're engaged in, so the nursing program as an example, so Mass Bay Community College. So we have funded now an effort where they're going to run 5 additional 10-person cohorts over the next year. And so they in fact, just launched one literally a couple weeks ago. And so there are 10 students, and actually there's an ESL component attached to this one, which is absolutely fantastic to make sure that they can pass this test, this certification test. So there are 10 students that are right now involved in this one that we're funding. Actually, we're doing it in partnership with a lot of different funders that have joined this effort. And this effort, already, there is an employer attached to it. So they are ready to hire those 10 students. They're going to finish that 8-week program, pass the test, and they're going to have a job. And starting salaries, by the way, for CNAs right now are around $50,000.
Yeah.
I think the beauty of this too, from the standpoint of being able to track them, is to say, okay, you now have a certificate. You are a CNA. You're making $50,000 a year, but you know what? Maybe that's not it for you. You want to do more, and so you can get an associate's degree in nursing, or you can go on and get your RN and be a registered nurse, right? So the path is now there for you to even increase your annual income and then buy a home and do other things, right? So that's what we're thinking about. Like, let's get folks on a career path. And of course, to your point, we can track, and we can actually, Mass Bay will do a great job of saying, okay, these are 10 people that we're going to now see. How are they doing? And there is actually mentorship and other supports built in to what they're doing. Another program we're looking at is around the life sciences. So life science labs, are opening up everywhere. It's kind of an explosion of the life sciences companies in the region. The Natick Mall is going to have now life sciences office space.
Really?
Absolutely. It's really incredible how many life science companies are, these startups are here and coming to the region.
What is life science? I mean, how do you narrow that down for me?
Yeah, it's like pharmaceutical, like drugs and other medical innovations, right?
So they're research companies?
Yeah,
kind of?
companies, research companies, and so they need lab techs.
Oh,
They need lab techs.
Sure.
And if there's so many of these labs opening up, you need folks to work.
Yeah.
And so we are working with another organization called the Metrowest College Collaborative, which is actually a partnership between Mass Bay Community College and Framingham State.
Okay.
And they are working directly in high schools. And so they're going to pilot a program where 25 Framingham and Waltham high school students, who are juniors right now, are going to get some pre-college courses that are specific to being a lab tech in a life science company. And then when they graduate from high school, I think they have to take one class at Mass Bay Community College under a gentleman named Dr. Singh, who runs a genome therapy lab tech program. And then they're basically have like a certificate to be hired as a lab tech. Starting salaries there around $50,000. So again, if they want to get a job, they can continue their education and continue to build. And again, that's another great career path. But again, these young people are also going to be tracked or worked with and mentored, and to make sure that they can find success kind of moving forward.
I think that the mentorship and the making sure that they're not just, I don't know, if for so many years it feels like, we offer something, somebody goes through it, he feels like he's on the edge of success, and yet something comes along that interferes with that success.
Absolutely.
Somebody in the family gets sick, or he gets upset about something and gets depressed, or runs out of money and he can't buy this, or whatever the crisis is, and that's when they kind of just fall off.
Absolutely.
And that's, to me, where the safety net needs to be. It's just a one-on-one. It's a very expensive way to do it. I recognize that. But unfortunately, long term, I think it's cheaper than just pouring money at the problem, because that hasn't worked.
And what's traditionally happened also over the years is there's been a lot of focus on getting kids into college, right?
Yeah,
Which
there
is
has.
absolutely fantastic,
For
right?
some kids.
For some kids, but not every kid. And
Yeah.
so what we're looking at with these tracks is that you don't have to have a college degree to have
Yeah.
a good career. Now, it's a bonus, and certainly
Yeah.
we would encourage that, and that's something that you still should maybe aspire to do. But these career paths that I talked about, you don't need a college degree to at least start making a good, healthy salary, annual income, and I think that's something that's important.
Are you aware of the trades program that's over here that does a Saturday class for people who want to go into the major industrial trades like industrial
So
plumbing?
the building trades is the third piece that
Yeah.
we're doing as well. And actually, I am aware of that.
Okay,
and actually,
good.
we're working with Mass Hires,
Good.
who actually is running that, I believe.
Good.
And we'll be funding a program to continue to educate folks around, young people around this as an option. Building trades are another
Huge.
great example.
Yeah.
We're not going to have any plumbers or electricians in about 10
No,
years.
and those are good paying jobs.
Absolutely.
They really are.
Absolutely.
I mean, I have to say, I think my plumber has a boat that I would love, you know?
No, absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
And off the air, so I don't have to embarrass him, but there is somebody in town that might be interested in getting involved in that, so I will give you
Wonderful.
that.
Please.
Okay.
Please. Thank you.
So is there any kind of structure? You know, when you talk about regional efforts, obviously
Yeah.
the hardest part is it being the glue. Somebody somewhere needs to hold everything together.
Sure.
And it sounds like in a lot of ways your organization is trying to do that.
Yeah.
But structurally, is there anything that holds your nonprofits together? Are there regular meetings? Are there newsletters that you share with everybody? Is there any of that kind of? It just seems overwhelming to me.
That is a really good question. I don't think there is any one entity that sort of owns that, but there is a network of different organizations and associations. I mean, there's like a hunger network that exists with organizations that are making sure that people are fed across different communities. There is a Metrowest nonprofit network. There are other entities. I mean, actually, the funders in this region actually get together quite often, and we're very collaborative and work closely together
That's good.
with Metrowest Health Foundation or the Sudbury Foundation or
Yeah.
Middlesex Savings Bank, which is, I think,
A big partner.
huge partner. I mean, Middlesex Savings Bank as a corporate entity around here they're heroes in terms
Yeah.
of what they're committed to. So, and they're a big partner with us as well. But so there are conversations that take place in that regard, and trying to sort of coordinate and again keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on. But so it happens, but I think sort of organically in a sort of myriad of ways.
So the diversity issue is huge, and
Yes.
I'm wondering whether or not there's a way that you share stories across your groups and so forth. So, like, I don't know whether there's a diverse Holliston group.
Wonderful.
I don't know whether they know about you, but hopefully when I finish this taping and we have the link, I will definitely make sure that we send it to them.
Please.
But, again, that kind of outreach to communities where maybe not everybody knows about what's going on.
Yes.
Is there a way to have that happen?
I think that's an excellent idea. Honestly, it's a great idea, and I don't think we have not necessarily taken that step to say we should reach out. And I think not just Holliston. I imagine other communities
Yeah,
have.
I suspect.
And I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we should look at and see if we can bring those groups together and to share, to your point, stories and success stories and challenges that
Yeah.
exist, and how we can all work together to kind of bring our community together. I know there's still some incidences of hate and other things that go on.
There are.
You hear about in schools and things of that nature.
Yeah, we've
and
had ours.
Absolutely, in Dover Sherburne, where I live, and so I think we have work to do still, and I think the more that we can bring folks together to have that conversation, I think that's a great idea.
I actually think we will always have work to do in this area. I don't think that it ever really, goes away.
Unfortunately,
and, and I think if we start accepting it as being a part of reality, that it makes it, acceptance is the big step. Accepting that,
Sure.
is the first step. But I know from my personal experience, I've lived in this town since 1966, and we've had, some folks that were from other races or other ethnicities than British English Irish kind of thing.
Right.
But until the last 4 years or so, I'd say 4 or 5 years, you go downtown and the people you would see were white.
Right.
And now I go downtown and I at least see a couple of people who are not white,
Yes,
which is,
absolutely.
it is a dramatic change. And that sounds silly, but it's every day.
Yes.
I encounter people who do not look like me, and I have to cheer that, hey, look, this is becoming the norm
Absolutely.
rather than the exception, and that's a
Absolutely.
good thing. That's a good
Absolutely.
thing. So I hope Holliston does link up with your organization and kind of somehow get its relationships built with you so that folks here can also take advantage of the opportunities.
Absolutely.
I think that would be great. So will you do future surveys too? I mean, is this something
Yes.
you'll
Yes.
ongoing way update and so forth?
Our plan is to update the data every 2 years.
Okay.
And so that way we can track and see if progress is being made and kind of how things stand in terms of all the different data points. And as you mentioned, in terms of demographics, right? As I mentioned earlier, it used to be 90% white in 2020, and now we're 75%. So things are changing, and we can see that over time. And so, absolutely, we'll be refreshing the data, and look forward to hopefully seeing some of the numbers that I mentioned earlier change.
Yeah,
as
get
time
better
goes
on the bad things, but
Yeah.
continue with the diversity.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's good. Jay, thank you so very much. And because I really stumbled over the organization's name at the beginning, and I apologize.
No worries.
Foundationformetrowest.org is your
Yes.
website. And the actual name of this project is what? The diversity, what is it called?
Our action projects?
Action projects.
Our
whatever, the
action,
impact.
Impact Metrowest is the
Impact.
data indicators website.
All right. But that is also linkable from your regular
Absolutely.
website. So
Absolutely.
we have the Impact Metro West project that is part of the website being, again, foundationformetrowest.org. It's a good group. We didn't really spend much time on the high school student project that they do, where students actually are the grant giving body, where they review the pitches that come from nonprofits or wherever, and they actually review them. And I love this program. I once had 2 students from Holliston who were involved in the program.
We've had many.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I've had them on my show.
Oh, fantastic.
And, it's a great project because it teaches children about philanthropy, but it also teaches them about the kinds of information you need before you make decisions.
Yes.
And it's typical or true for any kind of decision. What do you need to know? So anyway, folks, I hope you got something out of this. I hope you look up the Foundation for Metro West. And in fact, I urge you to get involved. Okay? That's really where it's all about, what it's all about. So thanks so much, and we'll see you again next time.